Hello everyone, it is Christine here and I'm back for part 2 of our video where we are using little scraps of fabrics, little lollies that we're displaying in a really attractive way so that we can pick from them and create projects. And what I'm creating here is a fabric collage piece that I am then slow stitching and doing mark making with stitching into, and then we'll be combining into a trifold pouch with you in this video. So in the last video we selected our fabrics, we collaged them together just using a bit of Yoo-hoo glue to fold them and hold them in place. And then since then I have done some stitching around to start to stabilize them, as well as starting the mark making process. And then I'm going to finish off that mark making showing you different stitches that you can consider yourself. And then we'll put the pouch together. So I'll see how much I get done in the video. I'll probably need to edit some bits out because I'll just keep it to an hour long video, and we'll then put a little fastening on. I've got a very sweet little button that is a little bird, and I've picked out some lovely vintage trim to use as a little wrap. But the real idea was with this piece was to really honor the scraps and just use some very simple stitching. In fact, I've only used one color of this beautiful thread that my lovely friend Kathy from Kmar's Creations, who's here on YouTube, I'll link to her. And she gifted this to me, which was just a really sweet thought, as well as some of these other threads. I think it's a silk thread. I've lost the cover that went on it. So because we're going to be doing some detailed work, I'm going to bring you down, but these are the two panels. This was the one we collaged in the last video, and then I've subsequently collaged this one using the fabrics that we selected. I have added in one further fabric over here, which is from a sheet, and I'll show you why I've done that on the back side, because that's going to be showing a little bit. And I'll also give you an idea that if you wanted to make an extra pocket in this pouch, I'll be showing you how you can do that as well. For me, I'm just going to make it a single pocket pouch because I feel like with all the padding and the size of it, I don't think it needs two pockets. So I'll bring you down now so we can do some of the detailed looking and some of the detailed stitching. So starting with this piece, what I've generally done around the outside is either used a running stitch, or in this case some little tiny seed stitches, and let me make sure I'm in focus, along all of the edges to make sure they were all anchored down. And then I've also gone around and just added some extra stitches when I had some spare thread at the end, just to anchor down the raw edges that were further inset to the fabric. That's not absolutely compulsory. I just wanted to make sure everything was going to sort of hold nicely. And then once you've done that, I also like to go around the pieces. Where you've got two pieces overlapping, I generally go on the upper piece of the fabric and do some stitching there. I have to remember you can't see right up to the top of the piece. And then I've gone all around the pieces with running stitch. And then I've done running stitch along here, running stitch along here. Done some little small running stitch. So you can do longer, you can do smaller, you can do ones that look more large on the front, or you can make the stitch longer on the back and shorter on the front. And then comes the fun of being able to add some of the embellishment detail. So you can see down here, and we'll do some of this together because I've left a couple of stars to do over here. And what I'll be showing you is how you can use fabrics that have a pattern to then overlay another pattern with your stitching, which is a really fun thing to do when you've kind of got geometric patterns to play with. On this one, I've done lots of tiny French knots, and we'll finish this off as well. So I'll show you French knots. I think I was doing 3 wraps. I'll have to remember. Here I have stitched some little hearts. I'm hoping it's showing up okay for you. It's a bit hard for me to see. Let me just have a look through the camera. Don't know if I need to bring them up a bit closer, but then I just worry it might not be focusing as much. What I might do is see if we can zoom in a bit. No, I think that will be just a bit too, they'll be a bit too close up, I think. So maybe I will just bring them up to the camera and give you a little look. Hopefully it will stay in focus. Up here I've done some more star shapes, again playing with the fabric with French knots in the middle. Some lazy daisies over here, which I'll show you because I've left another lazy daisy to do. I haven't yet added any stitching into this one, so we might have a play because it might be nice to add some little, I don't know, something, maybe just some probably not French knots because I've done those down here, so we'll think of something different for there. Doing a fly stitch down here. I'm pretty sure it's the fly stitch. So we'll finish doing that down to the bottom. Over on this one, again, some similar star shapes because I did use this fabric here and here. I wanted to get a bit more sort of yellow into this side, so that's why I used that one. This one, some crosses across here. Again, just some tiny little, almost like seed stitches here. You probably can barely see them, but there is, and it just gives it that lovely sort of upholstered look. And then here, over here on the lemon, on this blossom down here, I've been using some loose French knots to give some lovely textural elements. I've done some tiny little seed stitches into the lemon to give it that sort of speckled effect of a lemon, and some French knots in the centres of the flowers over here, and then some cantha stitching over here, little overcast stitches to stitch the pieces down. So basically, before you start doing your decorative stitching, you just want to know your pieces are held in place, or you can start the decorative stitching knowing that you'll kind of incorporate the decorative stitching into the holding down of the pieces. But the way I approached it was to first make sure my pieces were held down and then come in with the decorative stitching. So ultimately, what we're going to be doing in this episode is putting our pouch together, which will come together something like this. I'm planning to leave and attach this so there's just a tiny little sort of overlap there. And then I'm thinking my pouch will sort of fold up to about that point. And then we'll have a lovely little, again, offset here. So you're getting the benefit of an extra band. And that's why I put on the back of this piece here, I put an extra piece of fabric, which is turned over at all three sides, again, so we don't have any raw edges. I actually used a corner of a sheet, a large vintage sheet that has some lovely fading on it. It feels beautiful, and I thought the colours were perfect for this. And so then after I had folded in the one edge that needed folding in, just went around and did stitches along the edge to attach that in place. So the reason we need that there is when I was folding over my fabrics, it looked a little sort of bit messy. You could do it very carefully and not need this piece, but this is just a great way to be able to combine it together in a way that you can then have that sort of little offset effect and have the pouch look really, really lovely. So yeah, it's going to come together like that, because even though the pieces are very similar in size, by the time you've got the sort of the thickness of them, one of the pieces is going to be shorter than the other, and you can really play that up and make the most of it by then having the back able to sort of peek out. But we'll come to the construction a bit later. Let's just start with the mark making. So I'm using, as I mentioned, this thread from my lovely friend Kathy. I wasn't sure if it was going to be tricky, because sometimes the ones that are a bit more shiny and glossy, they can be a bit troublesome to stitch with, but this has been really lovely to stitch with. And I've got a few other colours, so I'll definitely be trying those on other projects in the future. Let me just click and make sure we're in focus. I'm filming this on Sunday evening, waiting be dinner time soon, but I thought I'll just get in a bit of filming of this because I'd done the earlier video yesterday, and then that way I'll have it ready to share with you after the first video goes out. By which time you're watching this, the first video will have gone out. So what I'm doing here is doing some crosses, and again, this is a great way to play with the sort of patterns that you've got in your fabric and use them to help guide, because it's a great way to get really neat crosses. If I tried to do crosses freehand, I don't think I'd be doing it nearly as neatly. And so all I'm doing is popping up at one spot where I want a corner of a cross, taking my needle across to the opposite corner where I want the cross to go, and then popping up at the other corner and then over to the other one. Doesn't actually matter what order you do them in, because the inside where all our stitching sort of our backside, that's all going to be enclosed apart from our little strip over here. It doesn't matter how messy the backside of your stitching is. But the great benefit with this particular construction method for the pouch is that, yeah, it's going to, you're not going to have your stitching going through to the other side if you were just using 2 bits of sort of fabric against each other. You're able to do all this stitching detail and not have that come through to the other side of your pouch. Not that it matters, and sometimes that might be the look that you're going for. This is just a project where I'm showing you a method that gives you quite a clean and polished finish, but still that lovely hand-stitched, slow-stitched effect. So we'll just work our way along, a bit like sort of cross-stitching, but on a patterned medium. And if you're doing crosses, I wouldn't go too big for the crosses, because you don't want your thread to be catching, particularly if people are putting something in a pouch. So this is probably the biggest I'd want to go for my crosses. And you could obviously do your crosses joining up with each other. I just wanted to sort of still leave the fabric and honour the fabric, but then just add this detail, which one will help to hold the sort of the layers together, but two just adds a lovely decorative finish and takes something that otherwise is beautiful scraps, but really I think starts to transform it when you can put your own beautiful stitching details into it. And while I have lots of trims and laces and beads and all sorts of things, I really wanted to honour the scraps, and really just use a single colour of thread, and let the scraps really sing and the patterns in them sing. But with this I think it's fun because you've got a pattern on a pattern, so it gives the eye something interesting to look at. And granted, this is going to be down inside the pouch, so again I actually like that, because it's like you're doing a lovely stitch detail even though it's not going to be out and proud on show, but it's a special little treat for the person with the pouch. If you're gifting it to a friend or something, it's a lovely little thing for them to have as their own little joyful thing that they see. I think it's sometimes the small details that transform something. Been watching a lot of Kevin McLeod on Grand Designs. I've just had that sort of running in the background this afternoon. I often put it on in the evenings when I just need a bit of total escapism from the working day. And he's often talking about, sometimes it's the simplest of materials, but it's just the details and things that go into it that make houses, in his case, really special. And I think there's something similar in stitching. And that's why I think I love slow stitching so much, because you are introducing so many special details. Okay. And then over to here. Put one last one. Now it's not an exact cross. I could have planned it all out, but nope, I did not, and so I'm happy. As I say, this little cross will end up enclosed probably in the area where we kind of bind the side together anyway, so you're barely going to be able to see it, but I may as well add it. And then I'm just going to tie off at the back. Again, this is all going to be hidden away, apart from this one little strip that I've left up the top, which will be shown on the other side of the pouch. So that's how I approach the crosses. So very simple. Let me show you these little stars. But again, you can just come up with your own designs. I just thought these start to give you some ideas if you've got some checked fabric, and it shows you how you can combine the checks, the stripes, the spots with then florals, because it is nice to kind of break up the florals with some other types of fabrics, or even the plains, and then you can add your own sort of line elements to them like I have done there. So with this I need to make sure I'm with these I left them at a more sort of random distribution, so I'll just work out where I want this one to go. The ones on the other side, I think I was more counting them. So I'm just kind of offsetting it in this direction, and in fact and offsetting it in this direction as well. And so I start at one top of a white square and come down to the bottom of the white square. And then on the next square over, this yellow pale square, I'm going to come up halfway along the square and bring it down to the bottom to the same halfway point. If you find it easier, you can put in all your sort of cross ones first. So you could put in like that one, this one, this one, and this one, and then come back to your others. But once you've kind of got your pattern worked out, it comes together. But again, you can work out your own patterns depending what fabric scraps you have. But yeah, don't discount things like if you have an old shirt or something, either from yourself or a partner or someone else, or maybe from the op shop, you can use those checks and things there. They are great elements to combine with the softer, prettier florals. And as I say, they give you a really good base to do some pattern making, stitching. This would be quite hard for me to get these exactly the same size, and they don't have to be, because you don't have to have everything perfect in slow stitching. But yeah, this has given me a way I can make a relatively consistent pattern, but then scatter it around to keep that random look. So then over to here. It probably is going to be a bit hard to see the yellow thread, but hopefully you can. I could bring you down a little bit. I'm just worried that I might go off screen if that's the case, but I'll just have to keep looking at my screen to make sure I stay where I'm meant to. And then what I've done once I've done all the radiating bits is just popped up in the center and done a knot. I think I did 2 wraps. Can't quite remember. Oops. So for a French knot, I'm going to wrap anti-clockwise, and then I'm going to, so I did it twice wrapped around, and then I'm going to push my needle in, and I'm going to hold my thread and pull my needle through. It's best to use a needle that's relatively the same thickness from top to bottom, otherwise it can be hard to pull it through, and then you get a beautiful little French knot. Let's see if we can focus it. Yeah, it's a bit hard getting it to focus at this sort of scale. So that is that one, so I'll tie that off there. But yeah, you could obviously use different weights of threads. Originally I was thinking I might use a perle, but I'm really happy that I've kept the stitching sort of subtler, but it really does just, give it some lovely texture, but also a lovely just little lift of light. So I'll come up here and we'll do some loose French knots to add the blossoms onto this lovely little tree scene. This was actually from a pair of shorts I got from Zara a while ago, and they were starting to wear out, and so I deconstructed them into some fabric scraps, and yeah, nice to use them because they've got that lovely sort of summer feel to them. Orange blossoms and lemon blossoms, although this does actually look a bit more like wattle, which is what I'm kind of thinking about here. Now my end was just pulling through, so a little trick if you're getting that is you can just put in an initial little stitch at the back to hold it securely. And then I'm just going to pop through here, and I'm going to do, because I want them to be loose, I'll do about 5 wraps I think, because I kind of want a little bit of bobbliness, not enough to catch on or anything on the piece. Now the tail has got stuck through. Which one's my tail piece? That one. And if they are a little bit bobbly like this one, you can just do a little bit of anchoring down with your thread. You can just pop through and put a little holding stitch, so that will just hold that a bit firmer as well. So I'll just do a few bobbly French knots here. So again, wrapping anti-clockwise, sticking my needle in, holding with my finger and pulling the needle through, and you get that lovely little knotty bobbliness. 2, 3, 4, 5, and again. And if you want a really tight one, the key thing is to keep your finger on the thread as it's pulling through. That's what gives you a tight one. If you're happy with the bobbliness, you don't have to keep such a tight grip on the thread. It can be helpful to have something under your surface that you can sort of stick the the tip of your needle into, so that you can just kind of, not be so wobbly when you're just lining it up and getting ready. When you're starting out, it can be a little bit hard to have it all. And because this needle is slightly bigger at the top, and I probably have made my loops a bit too tight, that's also something to watch for when you're looping around. Don't make too tight, because you might not be able to pull the head of your needle through. But using something like a milliner's needle, that can be good because they are long and thin. So on that one, I didn't make my loops too tight, and it was definitely much easier to pull through. Again, I'll do some wraps. I don't know if you can hear the rain outside. It's absolutely pelting down. I was lucky I took Travis to the park before. It was just starting to rain a little bit, so I had my brolly out, but yeah, we just sort of stayed under the trees, so it was okay. And then just gave Travis a toweling when we got home. He loves being dried with a towel. He gets very excited. I think he thinks it's a fun game to try and steal the towel, because he loves anything like a tea towel or face washer. I don't know why he loves them so much, but he does. So because the pouch is going to be kind of folding up, I might just do these ones over here, but I don't think I need to do the ones any further down. So let's get a few more done. So I'm going to have some leftover Japanese gyozas tonight. I just buy the frozen ones of those and cook them in a pan with some chili oil. And then I've got some rice that I'd cooked last night that I think I'll turn into pineapple fried rice with some egg and some pineapple. We've got some fresh pineapples from our veggie and fruit box. Got a huge variety in that. We get pawpaws. Haven't had pawpaw for ages, but yeah, we got a beautiful big pawpaw, just waiting for it to ripen a bit. They must be coming from Queensland because it's, winter here. Okay, just get a few more bubbly bits in to create the effect of the blossom. Whenever I see the sort of, the lemons and oranges, it reminds me of Italy and all the lemon groves, like in Sicily and down in the south, and the olive groves, and that beautiful fragrant smell of the lemon trees. When we were on the Amalfi coast, we stayed at a place, and there was a lovely restaurant. We're just in a little town, not one of the main Amalfi towns, and there was a restaurant up the hill that we'd walk up to, and then it had lemon trees sort of moulded to, or I guess they'd been kind of trained to grow along the top of the outdoor area of the restaurant. And as you'd sit there and eat, sometimes lemons would fall down. One fell down right near where a lady was sitting, actually. So I don't know if they purposely don't have it quite so close that it would fall on someone's head during the dining session, or if it's ever happened. It would give you quite a shock, I think, if a lemon fell on your head. But it was a lovely restaurant. Amazing how, back when we were travelling in Europe, we haven't been travelling sort of since pre-COVID times, but amazing how cheap some of the food in Italy was. We'd often feel bad, like you'd or wanted to just order a pizza, but it would only be €4 or something, and so you'd end up ordering some extra things, because you sort of thought, the restaurant deserves a bit more than €4. So that's that one with its lovely little bobbliness, and as I mentioned, I just did tiny little seed stitches on the lemon there. I've done further French knots, but tighter ones in here. I think that's all I need to show you on this side, and so then let's move back to this side and let's do some Y stitches here, and then we'll do a few more different star shapes on a different fabric, and then we'll go up and do the lazy daisy. There we go. So for fly stitch, what I'm going to do is start off by coming down, making a down stitch, and then I'm going to come out to one side. Again, let me make sure I'm in focus, sort of in line with where my other outside stitches were. Come over to the other side, and then holding the loop, pop my needle up where my bottom of my first down stitch was, and pull my thread through the loop that I've formed, and then bring it down, and that's going to create a Y. And then we repeat that process again, popping up over here. And you can do it all in one motion like this, where you pop it in and then pop it out, and hold the thread so that you're bringing your needle up through your loop so that the thread loops underneath your other thread, and that's what creates your Y stitches. So that's just a stitch I selected because it's got these little tulips down here, and so just playing again with that sort of little shape. I think they're going to sit the other way up when the pouch is all put together, but that doesn't worry me. I'm not wanting them necessarily to be tulips. It's just a lovely little bit of woven fabric. And it's nice to be using some of these little pretty scraps that I might not have used in other projects, because it is more of it's not a cotton, it's a more textured little scrap, but I actually like the different textures on a pouch. I think it gives you something nice to feel and hold, and know that it is something that is very combined of a multitude of things. It's definitely not mass produced, and that's something nice these days, I think. And so with my end, I'm just going to secrete it down into the fabric, and then hold it a bit tighter, cut it off, and it will just sort of spring back into the fabric. Then we can come over here and do some more little stars on this fabric. We've got our hearts to show you as well. I was wondering if I'd do a few bullion stitches on my little sunflowers on the piece up here. Haven't decided yet. The good thing with the padding is if I want to add some embellishments after I've put the pouch together, I'll still be able to do them, because the padding means you can just sort of pass your needle through the upper layer. So what I'm going to do here is come down one spot this way. So again, I'm using the pattern in the fabric to help guide where I put my stitches. And then I'm going to bring my needle down to the next dot down, and then over to this outside dot on the flower. And again, you can go in whatever order you want around. So I'm going to get a shorter little one there, and then a longer one here. And then a shorter one here. Again, let me just tap the camera, make sure we're staying in focus. So yeah, this is my challenge to you. Have a look at your scraps. See what you can do with them. Think about the fact that I use this as my sort of colour inspiration, but then I did add that sort of pop of orange, which I'm really happy that I did. I mean, this is almost an orange merging into a pink, but to me that's just added an extra little bit of edge to the piece, which I really like. But yeah, it did help just having a piece that started me off on the colour combination of the green, the pink, and the yellow, and then making yellow, picking one colour to make my hero colour with the thread, and then having that sort of be the unifying element throughout by using a single thread colour. So yeah, it's all experimentation. And there is no right or wrong. I'm just sharing an approach I'm using on this pouch, and I'm sure I will show you, as I have already done. There's many different ways to make a pouch. If you like seeing all your stitching sort of coming through from front to back, you can absolutely do that. You do you. As the lovely K3N says, you do you. End off and cut that end off from before, and then we'll come up here and do another star, and then we can move on to our heart's content. Okay, Okay, so we're going to do our next one up here. Over to here. Just a bit make it focus in a bit. It's a bit hard because I'm up in the air and clicking the button. So I'm doing all my cross strokes first, and then I'll come in and do the others. And you could just do the crosses. I just thought I really like these little star elements, and I do like the fact that they look like little upholstery. They kind of suction the fabric into the wadding, the padding. So it kind of looks like the middle of the sort of couch cushion where it's sort of, yeah, suctioned in. Now, do I want to go up and do one last one? Yeah, I think I might actually. So come up here. Can I even see? I can almost see my dot over on this edge. It's just under the fabric, so I can just angle it out. Again, it just helps to make everything cohesive because all these stitches are making the layers come together. And at the end, when I put the pouch together, if I feel I need to add any additional stitches to get the sort of the top layer and the bottom layer, like the two layers of the pouch together, I can always do that even once the pouch is formed up. Okay, so there we go. Have I done them all? Yes, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep, they are all done there. I've got some traverses first, so we'll have a bit of traverse caught in this pouch for posterity. Just need to click again to make sure we're in focus. Get a fresh bit of thread. And we'll come up and do some hearty hearts. Oops. So again, with the hearts, I've kind of scattered them around a bit. I haven't been too uniform with where I put them. So I think my last one I'll probably do somewhere over here-ish. Maybe starting about up there. Or do I want to go one over? Maybe one over there. And so I'm going to come down two this way, so two polka dots down this way, and then I'll pop up two down this way. So you've gone two down on a diagonal, and then I'm going to bring a stitch back up to there. So that's again two on a diagonal, and then I'm going to come down another two, continuing that straight line down. And then we're going to create the other edge of our heart. So two like this. And then two more up this way. Hang on, that's only 1, 2, 1, 2. Nope, that's right. And then two coming in this way. And then we're going to go two down to make the middle of our heart. So coming down here. And then because it's symmetrical, we'll finish our heart off by bringing our thread back this way. So it's basically comprised of a series of two. So going two spots up that way, two down that way, two, 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 and down. So that's our hearts, and I'm thinking I might actually finish my Y stitches so it starts all the way up the top. So what I can do here, I want my Y to start at the top, so I'm not going to put in the cross stroke down. I'm going to put in my other foundation one, bring my thread over to here and come up through my loop to create my first Y. It's a bit of a longer Y, but that's okay. And then I'm going to bring it down to where my Y's started, like that. And I'll tie it off here, like that. Okay. Now we'll come up and do our lazy daisy stitch up the top. So I need to just sort of pop up approximately between the two. Doesn't have to be exact. So I'm going to pop through. I've got a knot in the back, and I'm going to then hold the thread with my thumb there and take my needle back in where I popped up, and then angle my needle up to the top. So I'm holding my thread down to create a loop. I'm going to bring my needle up through that loop, and that's going to create a little petal. And then I'm going to go on the other side near where my thread came up, but so that I anchor down on the other side of the outside of the petal, and that's going to hold the top of the petal in place. And then I'll come round through the same hole in the center. Again, hold my thread down, poke my needle in, poke my needle out through the loop, so loops forming around my thread. And then holding that down, just anchor the beyond where the petal is, and anchor that down. And don't pull too tight because you want your petals to remain petals. So then turning it around, again holding my thread, angling my needle, making a petal, and then popping down, and again on this one. So you're always bringing your needle up so that you create a loop, and then anchoring down on the outside of your loop. And then we need to do this sort of diagonal petals. You can do it with an uneven number if you want it. I just sometimes find it easier that you can actually just sort of space them evenly around. But if it's going to bother you, because sometimes things do look better with an uneven number, but I don't think for petals on something like this that it's necessarily a problem. Now with this one, I've pulled it a tiny bit too tight. You can just sort of try and loosen it a bit by pulling it back before you do your next stitch. Or you can, if you end up with one that's really thin and skinny, you can go over and just put another loop on top of it, and then it'll just look like a bit of dimensioning in the petal, a bit of shading inside the petal, and you'll still get that sort of bolder petal effect. See that one I pulled too tight as well. Okay, and so we'll then just go through to there. And I will tie it up on the back, although, hang on, nope, I still need to do my little French knot in the center. That's what I did on the other ones. So, going to do, I think, 3 wraps as a French knot and bring it through. With this one, I don't want it to be sort of loose, so I'm going to keep a good hold on the thread, but don't pull it too hard because otherwise you might pull the knot through to the back. It's not the end of the world. You can then just have a go, leave the knot on the back and have another go. Very few things in the stitching world are the end of the world, are they? We can usually make right. So another idea would be I could do some bullion knots down here, but I'm kind of happy to, yeah, let this fabric I think is really beautiful. This one's beautiful, so I'm happy that I've got enough sort of embellishments. So I don't want to go absolutely crazy. So I think I'm ready to start stitching it together, aren't I? I've finished what I wanted to finish, yes. So I'm going to start with this bottom edge. So the pouch is ultimately going to be like this. And with this edge, I just want to leave a tiny little bit of the green showing above the pink. So that's where I'm going to start. I'm going to continue using this thread as a unifying element. And we'll see how we go for time. I'm just having a look. I can't actually see what the time is. I've got about 20 minutes, I think, left, so we'll see how we go. If not, I'll have to just fast forward or just sort of, yeah, cut out some of the boring stitching-y bits of it. But I think it should come together pretty quickly. So I'll bring my thread out. I'll just sort of secrete the tied end here. And then I'll just put a stitch in at the corner to start us off. And then I think I might just pop through. And I'm just wondering if I do a little sort of running stitch down here, holding the and just picking up a bit of the layers. Or do I want to actually just do more of a, maybe I'll do a more of just passing, just picking up the lower layers. Maybe that will be easier. I think it's going to be kind of hard to squish through all the layers. So this might be easier, just doing a little whip stitch along this edge. Just want to keep it about there. So I'm just picking up a tiny bit of the fabric from both pieces, trying not to catch on the corners. That's just going to combine our two pieces of fabric together. And I'm probably not quite in view, am I? Let's just check we're in focus again. So yeah, I'm just picking up a little bit of the fabric there and a little bit of the fabric on the other piece and pulling the needle through. Sometimes it can be helpful to have pliers if it's ever sort of a bit tricky to get the needle through. Shouldn't be too bad because there is just the two layers, but if I get a bit of wadding and maybe another bit of fabric or something, it might get trickier. Again, if you're doing a project like this, it's good to test your fabrics with a needle beforehand to make sure none of them are tricky to get through. But yeah, you'll barely be able to see it. If you're using a thicker thread, then you might want to do a more sort of either intentionally visible or intentionally more invisible, but this is almost going to just sort of, yeah, blend in, but we're going to see that lovely little bit of the green fabric showing just a little, which will be nice. Just adds another little interesting element to it. Just hints at what's on the inside. Could have probably even had it sit down a tiny bit further, but that's okay. Sorry, I'll make sure I'm staying in focus. I'm wanting to stay close enough that you can see what I'm doing, but it is always at risk of going off screen. Okay, let's push the needle through there. Okay, there we go, and then thought this woven fabric might be tricky to stitch through, but it's actually okay. And you can always use the surface underneath to help you sort of push the needle through as well. Obviously where you've got your fabric sort of folded over like in these corners as well, like you are going through a few more layers. Okay. So that's done. So that's just given us that lovely little hint of the green along the top of there. So then we can probably just continue our way around from here. And I am going to, I think, sew all the way around and then sew the folded bits together, because I want to sort of get it cohesive like this first, and then yeah, do the next stage. It's fair to say, and I'll probably show this in a future video, that if you wanted to have an extra pocket, it would be in here, that you would add some extra lining fabric here and here, and then make that a pocket, and obviously not stitch across here. We'd only be stitching down there and there. But I thought I'll save that for another video. I'll keep this just to a video showing you how to how to create a simple single pouch. So what I'm going to do, I think what I'll do is, because it's going to get very boring for you, I'm basically just going to be doing this over stitching all the way around. When I get up to, just when I get up, when I'm stitching, have I just, hang on, what have I done here? No, it's the right way. I was just having a moment where I was like, what have I done? No, that's the way it's going to fold. So I'm going to keep, stitching. I'm just going to make sure that it's still having the effect that I want it to have when I'm folding it. Yep, and we're still going to have this this edge sticking out when we come up and do all our stitching. But I will make sure as I'm stitching the side together, I will at some point when I've got this done, just make sure I'm sort of folding it so that I am getting that little bit of offset. In fact, what I will do, because I know that I want to have this little bit sort of offset at the end, I'm going to put some clips on so that when I'm sewing it in such a way that that will be the result on the side. Because as you can see, it's sort of, doesn't look like it's going to end up the correct way, but because of the bulk of the fabric, when you do actually fold it, that's how it's going to need to be stitched together. So I'll just need to achieve that through the process of the stitching together. In fact, what I think I might do, what I will do, is once I'm down to where I want the bottom of my pouch to be, that's when I'll actually stitch these two layers together. I think that will still give me, the freedom to do the same on the other side, and then that way when I come to do the top, I've already got that sort of fold stitched in. So I'll basically stitch down to here, and then I will stitch from here to here, and then I'll stitch these two layers together and do the same on the other side. So I have now sewn along this side and along this side. So I just wanted to show you at this point what I meant before when I was saying I would sew this section down to where I want it to fold. So I've just brought my stitching from there down to there, and likewise on the other side. I'm now folding it over like that, and what you can see up the top, if I've got it all sitting nice and flat, which that does, is that I then get that lovely piece here where this sits inset from the other piece, and that's where I will then put a little clip on so that I know that that's the point where it is going to be sitting. And I'll just sort of even it up a bit to my eye. And then what I'm now going to do, and I'll again do this off screen, is with this folded closed, I'll sew these two bits together. And likewise on this side, I will sew these two bits together, and then I'll do some stitches that sew these two combined bits, which will have stitching down each of these together while it's folded up. And that's going to mean that it is actually going to be sitting flat on this side, sitting flat on the back, and giving us this lovely little fold over section where we start to see so many bits of fabric. So we're getting a really wonderful patchworky effect. So I will continue to go away doing that. I'm just using the same thread and just that whip stitch on the edge. Okay, so I have finished stitching both the sides here. I've also stitched up here. I did decide to put a little bit of the trim that I'm going to use as my tie along the edge that will fold over, and I just wanted to show you how I'm stitching the final section, which is the bit that I have stitched first is across the top. This is where I've got the overlap and then the original other section of fabric, and I'm getting that stitched down first, and then I'm going to show you how I stitch down the final edge. And I've got it clipped so that it stays at the sort of width I want it to be. So I'm just, it's much easier to stitch it when it's laying flat like this, but I've got the clip on because that's sort of showing where it's going to ultimately need to bend. So there will be a sort of a bend of the fabric, and we'll come down this side once we've done the top section. And then I'll show you how I'm going to put the button on and use another piece of the braid to make a little tie. I'm really pleased with how it's coming together. The colours make me feel very happy. Oops. Come on. Oops, just unthreaded the needle, but that's okay. Oops. Okay, so now that I'm here, I'm just going to stitch back up to here, towards here, just to bring the two pieces together. Let me just click and make sure I am in focus. Squeaking as it goes. I don't know if I've picked up a different needle than what I had before. Always end up with a few needles on my work surface. And it's not a bad thing necessarily when you're doing these sides. If you put some extra stitches in, it's all just going to sort of give it good stability, particularly on the pocket component, because that's going to have a bit more pressure on it than even this this section won't have much pressure on it. But I still do want to get it nicely stitched together. There's a little tail from the braid there. I'll just get that removed. So we can then just head back down with the same thread. Again, it doesn't matter if you kind of put some stitches over where you've got them. And so at this point, I just need to make sure that as I come down, I'm getting my sort of two layers to stitch well together. And so if you do find you need to have it sort of folded over to help you see, but I generally find at this point I can just sort of hold it and get it into the position that I want. Extra stitch there. I'll travel my way down. So I'm just trying to pick up all the layers. And by doing this whip stitching, it just gives you a really cohesive edge. As I come down into the fold, I'll just sort of keep making sure that it's sitting where I want it to be. But it's pretty forgiving even if you end up with a little extra fold, like I had a slight little extra fold down the bottom. It was quite fixable just with the stitching process. This is where it's going to sort of curve around, so I might just help myself out by, I just need to click focus so that you can see it without it unfocusing on me. So as you can see, it sort of has to go around the fold. And that's why it's good to kind of look at how your pouch is going to fold rather than just sewing up the sides all in one go. So work on each sort of section and make sure it's folding the way that you want. Okay. I'm now all done with my stitching up, and we can put our little button on as a closure. You could do a button sort of hole if you wanted. I'm just going to do a button and a little bit of braid as my wrap to go around the button. Actually, I'll secrete the end into the fabric because that's a good way of doing it. Snip it off. So I'm going to use some more of this braid, and the way I attached the braid on was just doing little stitches, again whip stitches in each of the sort of divisions between where these lovely little tassel-y bits were. I'll just try and get you back in focus again. So if it's going to fold down like that, I'll probably sit my duck about there. Is that about even across? Yeah, somewhere there-ish. So I've got a little milliner's needle, a nice thin needle threaded up, and I'll just secrete the end inside the fabric. Put a couple of little anchoring stitches in just to make sure my button's going to stay on nice and secure. Put in a few little knots in here to anchor, and it's good to use a nice strong thread. I think this one's pretty strong. It hasn't really, I think I had one little breakage along the way with this thread. It's been pretty good. Oops. Now where did I want it? About there. I think that's about right. I fold that in half. There's my halfway point about there. Oh yeah, I mean this is actually, even though I didn't really do it to be a halfway point, that is actually about a halfway point there. Okay. So holding my pouch so that I don't go all the way through and skewer the back of my pouch, I'm going to get a couple of stitches in place. It's always a little bit tricky just sort of getting the needle to come up where you need it to. Oops, come on, through you go. These are very sharp needles, so I don't want to poke myself with that. Again, I don't want to stitch into the back, so I'll just carefully pull it through to the middle pouch. But I do want to sort of anchor the little ducky well. Wow, I got perfectly up through the buttonhole that time. Just as I say, I want to just get a really good amount of stitches in. Where is the hole? See, sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not. Okay, then I might come out to the surface under the duck and I'll anchor it off here, I think. This will be a bit easier to do it on the front than in the pouch, and I will want to put some good anchoring knots in place. That's pretty good. Again, I might secrete my tail into my fabric. Again, that will just help. Again, be very careful of your milliner's needles because they are very pokey. So that's like that. And then I've got my braid sitting here. And what I'm thinking with my braid, let's just see how it's going to work, is I can just put probably a single wrap around, and I won't need that much of it hanging off. Probably only need about that much hanging off, which means I'll probably only need about this much of the braid, I think. Just give myself a little bit extra. And I'll just have to think, how do I want to, I mean, the other way I could do it actually that I've only just then thought about is I could actually have it just loop under, but it will depend how thick it gets. So I've made it so that I can put a phone in, for example. But if it's a bit fuller, then yeah, probably the wrapping is still going to be the best method, I think. So let's get my other needle, put a bit more thread on it. Then we'll get our braid attached. So put that down. So our middle we decided was about there-ish. So I'll see if I can sort of poke my end a little bit into the fabric. Just pull the end in so it disappears. I might just trim the tail before I do that. And then the knot should just sort of jump into the little gap down here. And then again, I'll just put some little holding stitches in to start. Like this. And then we'll attach the end. I'll just probably fold this over just so we don't have a sort of raw end. Because the braid's quite woven, it is a little bit harder to stitch through. That's why it was quite good just sort of couching it down here, because I wasn't having to stitch through it. So couching, if you haven't come across it, is basically where you're just sort of holding something down with stitches over the top of it without actually having to go through it. Might need a little bit more actually. I'm wondering if I might try and actually angle this down into the gap as well rather than having it sitting on the surface. Yeah, I think I'll do that. Slight change of plans. Just unthread those last few stitches we've done, or we can cut the thread if we need to. Might do that, might be quicker for you. And what I think we'll do is try and put it down into our gap here in the fabric. Let's see how we go. And I might use my thin needle to get through the braid, see how that will work. So just wondering if I can make a little bit of wiggle room somewhere in here. And I might trim this a little bit just so I've got a non-ratty end to work with. Or I might even lay it where I've got the braid and then it can come down from there. That might work also. Let's give that a go. And then I can also then couch over it rather than having to stitch through it. Hopefully I'm on camera. Let me just refocus again. because it is a bit hard to stitch through, so I think this sort of couching over will probably work better. And it will just sort of blend in with the other braid then. I think if I lay enough stitches over it, then it should be all right. In fact, the milliner's needle is much easier to push through the braid than the other needle I was using before. I just want to get enough stitches in to know that it's securely held in place. So yeah, it's good having the braid across the front because it just sort of then blends this in, whereas if this was here it might look a little bit more sticky outy. Do another knot. And then I will cut that off there. Okay, so now we can see how our little twisty tie goes. So that's going to be great, I think. So I don't even think I need to leave too much of a tail, unless I want to end up putting a little bead or something on it, but I think probably that's actually going to be just right like that. So I might chop it off there, and then it just sits nicely. It holds nice and comfortably. Very easy to then untie. Inside I've got a great space to keep my phone. I'll just bring you up a little bit so you can see it in its final finished product. So there you go. Little birdie. Wrap around to close. Beautiful back. Lovely detail at the top. It feels so fabulous, and I love that if I'm using it as a little stitching purse, I can actually use it as a little pin cushion as well, because it's got plenty of that padding. And then yeah, inside it's got its nice detailing across the top, beautiful detailing there, and then it's even got interesting, including a needle to find inside. Not quite sure how that one managed to sneak inside. So yeah, really pleased with that. Feels fantastic, and I'd be really happy to give that as a gift to a friend. I think someone would absolutely be thrilled. I would hope to receive something handcrafted with love, and just to think that this all started from some little lollies of scrap fabrics that were sitting neglected in a box. So very exciting. So I hope you've enjoyed this little project over 2 series. If you missed the first one, go to the description box below and I'll have a link to it. And thanks so much for watching. Bye everyone.